Okay, let's get this started. We are doing the next part in this series on sculpture. Sculpture, if you haven't seen the original parts that we've been doing with this, then be sure to check those out. We're doing really more advanced things in this particular video. And so I want to make sure that that's clear for everybody that we're not going to really pull any punches and go back and explain some of the basics. This is the fifth part in the series. And from here, we're going to do one more video, I think, one more live stream that features on just using the instrument a little bit. And from there, after that video, we'll call it closed and just leave these out there for people to use as reference. So today we're going to cover, first of all, some of the odds and ends that perhaps we haven't talked about in the first four parts. Things that are kind of, that you might not have noticed if you've been using sculpture. Things that I always am a little bit surprised, not surprised, but it's like I like the depth of this instrument. And so we're going to cover some of those basics first. So first and foremost, I wanted to look at the objects here, object 1, 2, and 3. You'll notice we have pickup A and B, so these are the pickups underneath. And then we have the objects. And if you've ever wondered why they're like they are, the actual arrow shape here, where it corresponds with the orange line, the arrow is referring to the type of object that it is. So object 1, these are the activators, so to speak. And so the exciters, I think that's what the manual calls them. And then we have, with object number 3, the disturbers and the dampeners, which are down below. And then number 2 has both exciters and dampeners, disturbers, and so it has the arrows on both sides. So it's just an easy way to remember that the different types of objects that we have here. So the 1 coming from the top, those are the exciters. The 2 has exciters and the dampeners and disturbers, and then 3 we have just the disturbers and dampeners. Okay, kind of cool, right? A nice visual little cue to that. The other thing that we talked about briefly, but I don't think I even fully grasped this until I prepped up for this live stream, that the A and the B, the pickups, these do represent like the place where we're creating the sound in relationship to the actual objects. And we did talk about the spread, so which the spread is over on the far right. And if you activate this, then A and B become kind of like a panning function. So left part of the sound, right part of the sound. But one thing that I thought was really interesting, we're going to look at a little bit later in the stream with the surround sound, is that we have the ability to, using modulation, we have the ability to adjust the pickup position, but also the panning, and the panning is separate. We don't have a panning option out here. We don't have the ability to set the panning of these objects other than the pickups. And so that becomes a really interesting situation. But we can target the pickup pan using this modulation destination. This becomes important in surround sound because if we want to actually use the full surround sound, then we have to be able to work with that a little bit. So we'll look at that in just a minute. But I thought that was an interesting nuance, is that the position and the panning can actually be separately modulated. Okay, cool, I guess. And the last thing that we kind of talked about a little, but I don't think it was enough. And so I want to do that really quickly right now. And this has to do with the extended parameters and the render mode. So the render mode, it's like, yes, higher quality, kind of. That's a simplification that we used in the earlier videos. And the manual actually does a really good job breaking this down, although it's still confusing as heck. And so I thought we would just talk about that for a second. So the resolution slider at the top here of the screen, on the top of the material, um, the coders or the people who describe this sometimes refer to this instrument as a series or a chain of springs and masses. I mean, that's like an acoustic or a physics approach to looking at this model. So it's a series of those. And so um, the maximum number of elements, the masses, you set that with this resolution slider. So that really sets the complexity of this instrument. And I'm going to, for the sake of this, initialize the setting. So we get different complexity as we move the resolution slider. Well, the render option in the extended parameters down here, that essentially changes the scale of what you do with the resolution slider. So with the basic render mode, you have a maximum of 100 elements. Um, and so you actually are moving essentially the whole range into the range of hearing. And so that's, I think, why they most often start with this on basic, also processing. But when you do the higher render modes, say you go up to the extended, that's actually moving it from a maximum of 100 elements. Um, and that comes with a resulting maximum in situations of like 99 overtones of each voice. You move it to extended, it moves it to 1,000 elements and actually moves some things outside of our range of hearing in certain circumstances, but we can actually adjust that with some of these other tools and moving it down. I can hear a slight difference in that situation, but with other patches, you can hear a lot. And then the high definition, it's still 1,000 elements, but it's using 2 times oversampling. And so you have just so much more depth in what you can do with the sound. And then you end up with that ability. So then you adjust, they're all intertwined, the material, the resolution, the render mode, all of that stuff. And so you end up with different things. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that a little bit before we jump into surround sound. Now, surround sound, there's a few different steps for this. The first thing we do is in project settings. If you don't use surround at all, then this may not be something you're that familiar with. I think the highest we can go with this is 5.1, but let me check 7.1 real quick. Try to convert. I think, yeah, it can do 7.1. Okay, cool. But I think that's the max. It can't do any of the other higher formats. It can do lower surround formats, like it can do quadraphonic, which is actually super useful if you want to do sculpture and ambisonics. Okay, so we have this here. Let's do our multimeter. Open it up, and you'll see all the different choices here. The only thing that this may mess up is my headphone tracker. Let's see if this one actually, it doesn't, I don't think, do any higher than that. So we may go back to 5.1 just so I can hear what I'm doing here. Yeah. Let's pull that off for a second, and I'll even walk through that too. Waves. Yeah, none of them are letting, okay, so we can't. Let's go back to 5.1 just so I can monitor. And I'm using the headphone tracker from Waves. This is my go-to for everything related to surround sound and ambisonics. We'll go back to the Abbey Road. So I'm using the Abbey Road Studio for this. So you can see the little head there. It moves when I move my head. We're going to calibrate that to 0 and just turn it off. So we're using Abbey Road Control Room for this. Okay, back to 5.1. We have sculpture, which should be, but we're going to just make sure to reload it. Okay, cool. So this is a true surround sound instrument. I don't think I find that too often. There's a lot of these which are, stereo instruments which can do things in surround sound. But the sound generator is actually fully surround sound for this, which is super useful. And it means you can create soundscapes which are all around you. Of course, you're not going to be able to hear you. You're not going to be able to hear the surround sound because you're on YouTube streaming this, but you'll hear a little bit because I have the head tracker on. And so you'll hear like some essence of it. You really only be able to hear this if you're in a room with surround sound speakers or using a headphone tracker like this. Or converting this down to binaural, which is kind of what you're going to be hearing right now is the binaural down mix of it. So what we have with this instrument, I'm going to open up the bottom here, and I'll bring some of this stuff up to the top with a little zoom in. We have surround sound range, which talks about where the instrument in the field is going to be. And for our example here, we're going to turn this up to full 360. And then we'll leave the surround diversity at the default. But that, if you put this to 0, it means it's going to go out, well, virtually whichever speaker it's closest to, and it won't bleed into the other ones. And if you bring this all the way up to 1, then it would be like equal level between all of them. And then we have a delay crossfeed mode, which in surround lets us either do zigzag, counterclockwise, clockwise, front, rear, or just left and right still. Because the delay is now, as you can see up here, has the front, rear, left, and right for the actual delay signal. So that's also useful to be able to, so it has an effect that's in surround and the sound generation. So maybe to hear this, and this is the example they use in the actual manual, but I think it's really useful and clear. They put an LFO and they target the pickup pan. We'll just do it for A. That's the only one we're using. We're going to put this into like a bow mode here. Let me play a little bit. Give it a little gravel. Okay, so because we have the surround range at the bottom set to 360, we have the ability to pan using our pickups. We don't even need to worry about our spread right now. We'll talk about how that plays in a second. But let's do LFO1, turn it on, target pickup pan A, mount all the way up. I'm going to change the shape to sawtooth. And that's because the way that these parameters go, it's the 360 sphere, it starts on one side and it goes all the way to the other. And then if you do like a sine wave, it will like kind of go back and forth. But if you do the sawtooth, it'll hit the end, jump back to the other setting and continue on in a circle. So we want to use the sawtooth waveform in that way. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to set for this. Let's slow it down. Let me do my sustain up so I can already get a little sense of that, but let's use our eyes just as much as our ears here. You'll see it's low levels, but it is the ripple through the speakers is happening. And so let's do surround diversity down to 0. Now I've noticed when it goes down to 0, we still end up with constant signal in the left surround and the right surround. I think we're just pushed back a little bit. But you see that trickle throughout the whole thing as well. So this is a way to create a sound which spins around ever so slightly. Now we can change our spread. So it's going to change how much is in each of the speakers with a spread. So it's moving, but it's still kind of in all the speakers. And if I pull that the other direction, well, it's about the same still, which is interesting. But it's definitely more pronounced. And what you're having, instead of having a single point go around it, you're actually spreading it out so the whole spread is going around. So this all ties into these pickups being the key here to this whole process. And yet, even though those pickups really do play into this, when we're going past them to the target of the pickup A panning, then it's a little bit different in the sense that we're just having it pan around. So we could change this in a lot of different ways. For instance, we could do jitter, and we'll turn on jitter number 1, and we'll do pickup A pan amount. So that little variation that's happening, it's moving it around a little bit. So the sound is getting moved into the surround field at a randomized rate. Well, the rate is set, but the amounts are jittered or randomized. And so you can create some nice variation in the surround sound. In terms of all of this, this is it's pretty much it. So that's the overall capabilities of surround are just in that panning, which we can randomize, we can control with modulation, we could do it with a morph, we could do all of that. And so you could actually set up the morph so that if you moved it to these ones, it would get panned into each of the different corners or whatever. But it's really just the object generation part that's surround. And then the rest of it kind of plays into that a little bit. Okay, cool. That was one of the advanced techniques. The other one I want to look at today is the ability to use a sidechain as one of the objects. And this only plays into object number 2, where it says external. So you can see all of the other ones that are there. All of the exciters, all the dampeners, disturbers, and then at the bottom, external. And none of the other, you can't get that on object 3 or object 1. So the minute we set it to external, let's do key on so that it's, when I play key, it'll work. I go to sidechain, and I've already got a sidechain from one of the Apple loops. So this Apple loop is, let me push play. I'll let you hear what it sounds like. And actually what I want to do first and foremost, let's no plug-in on the sculpture for a second. Just because I want to do this back with the stereo version, not the surround version. I think that complicates a little bit. So walk through the steps, initialize, turn up the resolution, and turn off 1, turn on 2, go to external, gate, key on, set sidechain to the choir. I play the keyboard and nothing happens. That's because the sidechain has to actually be engaged. So let me just shrink this down a little bit here. Oh, there we go. And I'm going to push play. Oh, I think I need to return that down. Okay, we have it bust out pre-fader. so that I can turn down the fader and not worry about listening. So I push play, you still don't hear the choir. I go back up to the sculpture, which has all of it set up. And I still don't, oh, strength, turned all the way down. So we're gonna have to get control just a little bit. So the two sliders on either side, the timbre slider and the variation slider, in each case of these different objects do different things. In this case, with this specific input, we have two really useful things just for this particular thing. So they don't, it doesn't always matter, but they do. Let me actually pull this up from my notes. The first one is the cutoff frequency of a low-pass filter being used to process the sidechain. So that's this first one. So let's go all the way open. Or you'll hear very little now. So this is like the full range. And then the second one, this is the width of the string area that's being affected by the sidechain. So the whole string so loud. So we get a really interesting sound. So that's one example of a choir that's being blended now because it's the actual object exciting the string. We can change the material here. Okay, that's one example though. Let's do something, we'll just grab some more loops here for a minute because I think this is a great place to do things like this where we're not too worried about other stuff. But let's do that one. And I'll just pull this over here. I don't know yet how loud this is going to be, so let me turn down my strength. Getting a lot of resonance there from the wood material. Let's go to steel. Let's take it down just a hair. without being a vocoder, it's very much like a vocoder. We're using different principles. You can't call something a vocoder if it's not, but I certainly get a lot of like similarity feels from the two types of instruments. And so we get to create all of this, material. We have this whole process over here of, what objects are here. We can actually add additional objects in here. Let's do like a pick, and we'll do like a bound. The bound, just FYI, is very much, it's like a boundary, and they're considering that to be like a fretboard. So you hold the string down, you're picking it with a pick, you're holding it against a fretboard, and that gives you a similar thing there. So we'll put it on always instead of a key on. Ooh, that's an interesting sound. Some really cool stuff from that. But we can then mix in object 2. And then every once in a while, it just like totally changes. Oh my gosh. Oh, I see why. I changed the resolution accidentally. Cool sound, right? So we're not just adding various parts. So for instance, if you look at the ES2 synthesizer, right? And we look at this, what could be perceived as a similar function. 3 different sound sources, a little triangle that lets us go between them, right? This is like a pan knob, or a balance knob rather. It's like we get to choose all 3, no 1 and 2, all 2, no 1 and 3, all 1, no 2 and 3, some combination of all of those. But they don't play together at the end of that. They're not like built into the same sound. On this one, object 1 may be a pick, object 3 is maybe the fretboard, object 2 may be this drum loop that I pulled out from Apple Loops, right? But they don't all just like do their thing and then get mixed together. They all interact with this model. And they all get input in there, and then they say, well, if this is happening from object 1, and this is happening from object 2, and this is happening from object 3, the resulting sound would be this brand new amazing thing. And it ends up sounding really cool sometimes. Sometimes super unpredictable, but sometimes conceptually, you have to think about it differently, and then you'll know what you're going to get from it. Cool. So, we could find different things that we wanted to put out here. Anything could be a sidechain, even a live microphone if you wanted to. But let's just do a different drum loop for a second. I'm just putting them all on the same track for ease of routing. And let's change the pick to be a bow. So really the sky's the limit. We can change the material still. Let's do something maybe less rhythmic. Let's see how this might sound with like brass, for instance. Because I do think that this has the potential of, like, I mean, this is a longer section. Let's see. So the one thing about using really tonal material is that it is going to bring some of that with it, unless you perhaps filter some of the higher stuff out so you get lower parts of the sound, or you say don't affect the entire string. Even then, it really is still bringing most of it. So you could do this and match the sound. So I'm going to try something here that I've never tried. I'm bringing the MIDI from the original horn sample into the sculpture to see what it's like when they match. Interesting. It's like what a weird. That's the first time I've ever tried that. I'm going to try just one thing real quick. Model, we'll do the sculpture again. Just the default. Ooh, I don't know if I can just do default. Initialize setting, we'll do it. Option, click that down. I just want to hear what it sounds like without the side chain. No, see, I can't do it. Let's try that one again. It's like I'm trying to change the material and it's not really working. So something's going on here that I don't fully understand. Oh, I know what is going on. Ignore everything we just did for like 5 minutes. Jeez Louise. Stupid ES2. I was like, this doesn't sound anything like it. I'm not making changes. Something was routed wrong, and that was me. Oh my gosh, this is going to sound so much better. Oof. Gonna have to put a note about that one in the live stream. Just wait for the time. Wait for the time when you're triggering the wrong instrument and it sounds totally wrong, no matter what you do. Okay, let's try this again. turn off object 1. Mute that one. Let's just delete it so we don't do that again. Okay. That's what I was expecting. So then let's turn off that object and just do object 1 with a pick. Why wouldn't I just do this? Why wouldn't I just do the MIDI from something and just create a whole new sound? Well, using it as external, you actually maintain some of the characteristic of the sound and you're morphing it in with the new material. If that's loud for me, it's got to be fairly loud for some of you as well. Okay. Little hiccup aside of playing the MIDI out the wrong instrument. You get the idea of the external option and some of the possibilities with it. You can incorporate this just like you would with the other two objects, with all of the other pieces here, with the morph envelope, with your LFOs, pretty much everything. And so I think that that becomes an exciting way to incorporate something from the outside into this instrument. Okay, we are about 37 minutes into this. There's a few of you watching. Any questions? Any questions about sculpture that you want answered before we pull the plug on this? I've discovered that sculpture is really best for non-percussive things. You can do some cool drum things, and you can do some cool things with toned percussion like marimba, xylophone. But I was trying to create some other stuff, and it was definitely like a challenge. I'm really good at certain types of sounds in sculpture. This is the song concept I've been working on that we're going to use in the next video. I'll play it here for a second. Oh, what do we got here? So sub. I like that kind of heartbeat sound. Kind of like some industrial hammer action. Here we have, that was a bass sound. Here we have some ambient stuff. And then solo. What I want to do for the next video is to actually go through and create an entire song just using sculpture. So sculpture for every instrument except for voice. Um, this was my first notepad, just thinking of some ideas and some sounds and textures. I like, of course, the bass sound. I actually don't mind this, the kick sound. Got kind of an 808 aesthetic to it, but not quite. This sound, this like hammer thing. Not as sure I like that as much. It could be that I just need to change some of its like. No. Ooh, maybe. Slightly more like a hi-hat. This is the problem, I think, with sculpture in general, is you can come up with a lot of sounds, but is there an easier way to get to where you want to go than sculpture? I would say most likely for most things that you're trying to replicate, there's an easier way to get there. There's an easier way to get there for everything, except some of them are deceptively easy. And so, I think that we sometimes say, you know what, I just want to get a guitar sample that replaces a guitar player. Well, the real truth is hiring a guitar player is almost always going to be faster in the long run. I mean, you're going to get more what you want from someone who's experienced guitar player. And so do we need that? It's a toss up. So that's the question. We've run out of people watching this. So I think we're going to close the door on this stream and move on to one more stream of this in the future, and then probably never talk about sculpture again. These videos haven't been, you know, the floodgate of interest, but I think it's a really important resource in Logic that I hope you're interested in using and doing. So that's it. I'll see you all later.